Maya Lawrence, a black cashier at a Value Mart in Richmond, hurled herself across 3 checkout lanes, slammed her knees onto cold tile. She locked her fists around the ribs of a 70-year-old stranger choking in aisle 9. Face purple, fingers clawing her own throat. 3 compressions, nothing. 2 more, harder. The chunk shot free. The woman gasped, ragged, desperate, and collapsed into Maya's arms. The store erupted. The store manager saw the whole thing. But he still walked over, ripped Maya's name tag off her chest, and fired her. Right there, on the same tile still warm from her knees. Maya didn't look at him. She pulled off her apron, dropped it on the counter, knelt back down, and helped the old woman to her feet. She walked her out through the front door without ever knowing who she'd just saved. But what happened next shocked everyone, including the man who fired her. To understand what Maya lost that day, you have to understand what she'd been holding together. She started at Value Mart 4 years ago, 2 months after Zoe was born. The job paid $11.60 an hour. No benefits, no sick leave. But it was walking distance from her mother's apartment, and her mother watched Zoe while Maya worked. That was the math. That was the whole equation. She worked the morning shift and the evening split. 12 days out of 14. Her register never came up short, not once in 4 years. She knew the produce codes by heart. She knew which regulars wanted their bread bagged separate. She knew the exact pitch of the scanner beep that meant a barcode had failed. The job wasn't glamorous, but Maya did it like it mattered because to her it did. She was the only black cashier on most shifts. The other employees were polite enough small talk in the break room, a nod in the parking lot. But polite and close are different things, and Maya learned early not to confuse the two. When things got uncomfortable, when Greg's voice got a little too loud in her direction, when a write-up showed up that didn't quite make sense, nobody looked up. Nobody said a word. Maya noticed. She just stopped expecting them to. Greg Dawson had been store manager for 6 years. He ran the floor the way a man runs a floor when he knows no one above him is watching. Small things mostly. The kind that don't leave marks. He once scheduled Maya for a holiday double shift, then denied her overtime request because she hadn't pre-approved it through a form he never told her existed. When Zoe spiked 103 fever and Maya called in, Greg docked her a personal day she didn't have, which turned into a write-up. When the Tuesday morning slot opened up better hours, better tips from the regulars, he gave it to a cashier with 5 months' experience and a last name that fit more comfortably in his mouth. Maya had 4 years. She filed a request for promotion 3 times. 3 times Greg found a reason. Not enough leadership experience. We're looking for a different fit. Maybe next quarter. Next quarter never came. Maya didn't complain. Not because she accepted it, but because complaining cost more than silence, and she couldn't afford either. She kept a first aid kit in her locker. A cheap 1-gauze Band-Aids antiseptic wipes bought at a dollar store the week she found out she was pregnant with Zoe. She'd taken a CPR course at the community center that same month. 8 hours on a Saturday, a rubber dummy on a folding table, a certificate she laminated and tucked into her wallet. She never thought she'd use it. She carried it the way some people carry prayer, just in case the worst showed up and no one else was ready. On the Thursday evening, it all fell apart. Maya clocked in at 3:15 p.m. Her sneakers were gray. Her name tag was fading. Her daughter was at her mother's apartment eating microwave mac and cheese. It was an ordinary day, the kind that doesn't warn you. The after-work rush hit Value Mart at exactly 5:30, the way it always did. Carts jammed the aisles. The bakery line backed up past the frozen section. A kid was screaming near the cereal display, and the overhead speaker was playing something soft and useless that nobody could hear anyway. Maya was halfway through her second line of the evening, a man with 2 cases of beer and a pack of diapers, a woman counting coupons from a binder when Dorothy Pennington walked into the store. Nobody noticed her. There was nothing to notice. She was 74, small-framed, with silver hair curled close to her head and a cream cashmere coat that was too nice for a place like this but too understated for anyone to care. She pushed her own cart. picked up a loaf of whole wheat bread, a carton of eggs, a jar of honey. She moved slowly, the way people move when they're used to doing things alone and have made peace with the pace of it. She didn't have a driver waiting outside, no assistant, no one calling to check if she needed anything. Dorothy Pennington was the mother of a man whose investment fund managed $11 billion in assets, and she was grocery shopping by herself at a Value Mart on a Thursday evening because that's who she was. Nobody in that store knew any of that. Not yet. She finished her round and joined the line at Register 3, the one closest to the exit. Maya's register was 2 lanes over. They had never met. They had no reason to. The line moved slowly. Dorothy shifted the basket to her other arm. She opened the jar of honey and dipped her finger in an old habit, something she'd done since childhood. She licked her finger, smiled to herself, and then her face changed. The honey caught. Thick and heavy, it slid down the wrong way and sealed against the back of her throat like a plug. She coughed once, sharp wet, then again, harder. Her hand went to her neck. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. No air in, no air out. Her face turned red, then purple. The basket slipped from her arm and hit the floor. Eggs cracked across the tile. The jar of honey rolled under the nearest shelf. Dorothy staggered sideways, knocked into a display of canned soup, and grabbed the edge of a shelf with both hands. Her knees buckled, her body folded forward. She was going down. People stepped back. A woman pulled her child behind her and covered the girl's eyes. A stock clerk froze mid-step, holding a pricing gun like he'd forgotten what it was for. The man at Register 3 turned around, saw what was happening, and turned back to his phone. Someone said, "Oh my God!" But nobody moved. Not one person in a store full of people took a single step forward. Maya heard the cough first, then the crash. She looked up from her register and saw it a small woman in a cream coat, hunched over, face the color of something dying fingers clawing at her own throat. She knew that look. She'd seen it once before on the rubber dummy at the community center in the CPR course she'd taken 6 years ago. Airway obstruction, complete blockage, no breath going in, no breath going out. Minutes, maybe less. Maya looked at the line of customers waiting at her register. Looked at Greg's office door, shut as always. Looked back at the woman whose lips were turning blue. She didn't think about her job. She didn't think about Greg. She didn't think about what happens to a single mother with no savings when she loses her only paycheck. She stepped off the mat, left her register open, and ran. Maya crossed the floor in 4 seconds. She didn't remember how. One moment she was behind the register, the next she was on her knees beside a woman she had never seen before, whose face had gone from purple to gray. Dorothy was on the ground. Her back was arched, her hands were at her throat, and her mouth was open in a shape that should have been a scream but had no sound. Her eyes were wide, not with confusion, but with the kind of terror that comes when your body tells you it's shutting down and your mind hasn't caught up. Maya grabbed her from behind, wrapped both arms around Dorothy's midsection just above the navel, the way the instructor had shown her on the rubber dummy 6 years ago. She locked her right fist against Dorothy's stomach, covered it with her left hand, and pulled. Nothing. The honey was too deep, too thick, too far down. Maya adjusted. She shifted her knees wider on the tile for leverage, pressed her fist higher into the soft space beneath Dorothy's ribs, and pulled again. Harder this time. She felt Dorothy's body jerk against hers, small and fragile, like holding a bird with a broken wing. Nothing. Maya's arms were shaking. Her breath was coming in short, shallow bursts. The rubber dummy at the community center hadn't fought back. The rubber dummy hadn't gone limp in her arms. The rubber dummy hadn't made the sound Dorothy was making, now a thin, wet whistle that meant the last thread of air was almost gone. Someone behind her was crying. Someone else was on the phone. She could hear the words, "not breathing," and aisle 9, but they sounded far away, like they were coming through water. A manager from the deli section ran halfway down the aisle, then stopped like he didn't know what to do with his hands. A teenage boy stood frozen with a bag of chips pressed against his chest, eyes wide, mouth half open. The whole store had turned into an audience, watching, waiting, doing nothing. And Maya was the only one on stage. Her wrists ached. Her lower back was screaming. She could feel the grit of the tile through her pants cutting into her kneecaps. Sweat ran down her temple and dripped off her jaw onto Dorothy's shoulder. She couldn't tell if the wetness on her own face was sweat or tears. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the next compression. Maya closed her eyes. She thought about Zoe. She thought about what it would feel like to be 6 years old and choke on something and have nobody help. She thought about her mother who wasn't here. She thought about the CPR instructor, a retired paramedic named Joan, who smelled like coffee and said the same thing at the end of every class. When it's real, you won't feel ready. Do it anyway. Maya opened her eyes. She repositioned her fist one more time, higher, tighter, right up under the sternum. She braced her knees. She took one breath, and she drove upward with everything she had. The chunk of honey, thick, golden, half-dissolved, shot out of Dorothy's mouth and hit the tile with a wet slap. Dorothy's chest heaved. She sucked in air like she'd been held underwater for a full minute. The sound was raw and ugly and beautiful all at once. Dorothy collapsed forward. Maya caught her, held her, felt the old woman's fingers dig into her forearm with a grip that was stronger than anything her body should have been able to produce. Dorothy was shaking, her whole frame vibrating against Maya's chest like a motor winding down. Maya held her tighter. The store was silent for 3 seconds. Then it erupted. Applause scattered at first, then loud. A woman near the bakery was sobbing. The stock clerk with the pricing gun was standing with his mouth open, the gun dangling at his side. The man who had turned back to his phone was now recording with it. Maya didn't hear any of it. She was looking at Dorothy's face, the color slowly returning pink, creeping back into her cheeks like dawn breaking, and she was crying. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that happens when your hands are still shaking and your brain hasn't caught up to the fact that it worked. Dorothy's lips moved. No sound came out at first. Then barely a whisper, thin as paper cracked at the edges. She said something that Maya would carry with her for years. "Don't let go." Maya didn't. She sat on the cold tile floor of aisle 9 holding a stranger in her arms until the paramedics arrived 11 minutes later. She didn't move. She didn't check the time. She didn't look at her register. Somewhere behind her, Greg Dawson stood at the end of the aisle with his arms crossed, watching the whole thing. He didn't call 911. He didn't kneel down. He didn't say a word. He checked his watch. The paramedics loaded Dorothy onto a stretcher at 6:23 p.m. She was conscious, breathing on her own, an oxygen mask strapped over her face. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, her hand reached out, searching for Maya's. Maya took it, squeezed once. Dorothy squeezed back. Then the doors closed and the ambulance pulled away. Maya stood in the parking lot for a moment. Her knees were bruised from the tile. Her polo shirt was damp with sweat and someone else's tears. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but her chest still felt tight, the kind of tight that comes after you've held your breath too long and your body doesn't trust you to breathe normally yet. She walked back inside. Greg was waiting by register 4, arms crossed, jaw set. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't ask about the woman. He looked at the register drawer, still open, the line now rerouted to other lanes, and then he looked at Maya. My office. Now, the office was a 10 by 10 room behind the customer service counter. A metal desk, a rolling chair with a broken armrest, a poster on the wall that said, "Teamwork makes the dream work," in faded block letters. Maya had been in this room 4 times before, once for her interview, 3 times to be told she wasn't getting promoted. Greg sat down. He didn't offer her a chair. "You abandoned your register during the busiest hour of the day," he said. "You left your drawer open. You left a line of customers standing there with no one to check them out. You created a scene in the middle of the sales floor." Maya stood still. A woman was choking. She was dying. "That's not your job." Greg leaned back. "Your job is to scan items, bag them, and collect payment. That's what we pay you for. If there's a medical emergency, you call a manager. You don't leave your post." "You were standing right there," Maya said. "You didn't move." Something shifted in Greg's face. Not guilt she'd been here long enough to know he didn't carry that. Irritation. The kind that comes when someone lower on the ladder says something you can't deny but refuse to acknowledge. This is a policy violation, Maya. Clear cut. I'm gonna have to let you go. The words landed like concrete. Maya had imagined losing this job before, late at night staring at the ceiling running the math of what would happen if Value Mart went under or cut hours again. But she had never imagined losing it for this, for saving someone's life, for doing the thing that any decent person would do without thinking. "You're firing me," she said. Not a question. "Effective immediately. I need your badge, your vest, and your locker key. I'll process your final check and mail it to your address on file." Maya reached for her name tag. It was already gone. She remembered now the weight of Greg's fingers tearing it off her shirt in the aisle in front of everyone before the paramedics had even finished loading Dorothy into the ambulance. She unclipped her badge, set it on the desk, pulled the locker key from her pocket and placed it next to the badge. Two small pieces of metal on a metal desk. 4 years reduced to a sound clink-clink. Greg didn't look up. He was already typing something into his computer. Maya turned and walked out of the office. The store was quieter now. The rush had passed. A few employees glanced at her from behind their registers. One of them, a girl named Stacy, who had started 3 months ago, opened her mouth like she was about to say something. Then she closed it, looked down at her scanner. Nobody said goodbye. Maya walked through the automatic doors across the parking lot to her car, a 2011 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a car seat in the back. She got in, closed the door, put both hands on the steering wheel. She sat there for a long time. Then she called her mother. "Can you keep Zoe tonight? I need—" Her voice broke. She swallowed. "I just need a minute." She didn't cry in the store. She didn't cry in front of Greg. She didn't cry in the parking lot where someone might see. She cried in the car alone with the engine off and the windows up for 22 minutes. The first week wasn't the worst part. The first week still felt temporary. Maya told herself she'd find something fast. She had 4 years of retail experience, a clean record, a drawer that never came up short. Richmond wasn't a big city, but it had grocery stores and gas stations and restaurants that always seemed to be hiring. She applied to 9 places in 7 days. A Walgreens on Broad Street, a Target near the mall, 2 restaurants in Shockoe Bottom, a daycare center that needed a front desk receptionist. She filled out every application by hand because her laptop was too slow to load the online forms. She wore the nicest blouse she owned, the one she'd bought for Zoe's preschool graduation, and smiled at every manager who gave her 2 minutes. Nobody called back. She applied to 6 more the following week. Same thing. Nothing. Not even a rejection email. Just silence, the kind that makes you check your phone every 30 minutes and then hate yourself for checking. On day 16, she found out why. She was at a Food Lion 2 towns over filling out an application at the customer service counter when the assistant manager, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, came back from the office with a look Maya recognized, pity mixed with policy. "I'm sorry, hun. Your previous employer has you listed as terminated for misconduct." Maya's hand stopped writing. "What? Misconduct? That's what's in the system. I can't move forward with this. I'm sorry." Misconduct. 1 word. 7 letters. Greg Dawson hadn't just fired Maya. He had branded her. He had written a word into her employment file that followed her like a scar, invisible until someone pulled back the sleeve. Every application she'd submitted, every manager who'd looked her up, every silence that she'd mistaken for bad timing, it was all Greg. Every door she'd knocked on had already been locked from the inside. Maya drove home and sat in her car for a long time. Again. She pulled up the calculator app on her phone and did the math she'd been avoiding. Rent, $840. Electric, $62. Water, $31. Zoe's after-school program, $200. Groceries, if she cut it to rice, beans, eggs, and whatever was on clearance, maybe $90 a week. Her last paycheck from Value Mart had been $412 after taxes. It was already gone. Her savings account had $16 in it. She had applied for unemployment, but the claim was under review, and she already knew what Greg's version of events would look like on the form. She put the phone down, stared at the cracked windshield. A spiderweb fracture ran across the glass from the lower left corner. She'd been meaning to fix it for 2 years. She never would now. The bills kept coming. Electric, water, rent. The landlord had been patient the first month. He knew Maya knew she was good for it. But patient has a shelf life, and his ran out on a Tuesday afternoon when he slipped a yellow notice under her door. 30 days to pay or vacate. Zoe noticed things. She was 6, not stupid. She noticed that the TV was off more than usual. She noticed that dinner had gotten smaller rice and beans 3 nights in a row than 4. She asked why Maya was home all the time now. Maya said she was taking a break. Zoe asked if breaks were supposed to make mommies cry. Maya didn't answer that one. Then the letter came. It was from Derek's lawyer, Derek, Zoe's father, who had moved to Charlotte 2 years ago and paid child support when he remembered and called on birthdays when it was convenient. His attorney was requesting a review of the custody arrangement, citing Maya's change in employment status and inability to provide a stable home environment. They wanted documentation of income, housing, and childcare arrangements within 30 days. Maya read the letter standing at the kitchen counter. She read it twice. Then she folded it, placed it inside the utility bill, and put both inside the bread box because the bread box was empty anyway, and at least there they wouldn't stare at her from the table. She started to wonder if she'd made a mistake. Not the kind of wondering that comes with clarity, the kind that comes at 1 a.m. when the apartment is dark and your daughter is sleeping 10 feet away and you can hear the refrigerator humming because there's nothing else to hear. Should she have stayed at the register? Should she have called Greg instead of running? Should she have let someone else save that woman? She knew the answer. She hated that she was asking the question. Maya didn't want to fight. She wanted to move on, find a job, pay the rent, keep Zoe fed, keep Zoe close. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. But misconduct wouldn't let her move on. It sat in her file like a lock she didn't have the key to, and every time she tried to walk through a door, it was already there waiting. So she fought. She sat at her mother's kitchen table one night after Zoe went to sleep and typed an email on her phone because her laptop was dead and she couldn't afford to replace the charger. It took her 3 hours. She wrote it, deleted. It wrote it again. She wasn't a writer. She wasn't a lawyer. She was a cashier who got fired for saving a woman's life, and she was trying to explain that to people who had never met her and had no reason to care. She sent it to Value Mart's corporate office, the parent company, Henderson Retail Group. She addressed it to the head of human resources. She described the incident. She described the termination. She described the word misconduct and what it was doing to her life. She asked for a review. She asked for her record to be corrected. She asked for anyone to look at what happened and tell her it wasn't right. She got an auto reply. Your message has been received. A representative will be in touch within 5 to 7 business days. No one called. Not on day 5, not on day 7, not on day 12. She sent a follow-up. Another auto reply, same words, same nothing. On day 15, her phone rang. It wasn't corporate. It was Greg. His voice was calm, controlled. The voice of a man who had made this kind of call before. Maya, I'm going to be straight with you. I know you've been contacting Henderson about your termination. I want you to understand something. What you're doing, sending emails, making accusations about a store manager, that's defamation. That's a legal matter. And if you continue, I will have no choice but to pursue it. Maya sat on the edge of her bed. Her hand was gripping the phone so tight her knuckles ached. I didn't lie about anything, she said. That's your perspective. My perspective and the company's perspective is that you violated store policy and were terminated accordingly. If you keep pushing this, you're going to end up in a courtroom you can't afford to be in. And I think you know that. He hung up. Maya put the phone down. She stared at the wall for a long time. She thought about calling a lawyer. But lawyers cost money, and she had $43 in her checking account and a custody letter sitting in an empty bread box. She withdrew the complaint. That night, she gave Zoe a bath and read her a story, the one about the caterpillar, the one Zoe had heard 100 times and still asked for. Maya did the voices. She tucked the blanket around Zoe's chin. She kissed her forehead and turned off the light and stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to her daughter breathe. She had saved a woman's life. She had done everything right, and now she was standing in a dark hallway, in the apartment she was about to lose, being threatened with a lawsuit she couldn't fight by a man who had watched someone choke and checked his watch. She went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet so Zoe wouldn't hear, and cried into a towel. 3 minutes. That was all she allowed herself. Then she washed her face, folded the towel, and went back to being a mother. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. The co-workers who had watched Greg rip off her name tag hadn't texted her once. Not Stacy. Not anyone from the break room. Not a single person who had clapped when she saved Dorothy Pennington's life had thought to ask what happened to her afterward. Maya was alone. Completely structurally alone, the kind of alone that isn't about having no one around, but about realizing that the systems you thought would catch you were never built with you in mind. That night, after Zoe fell asleep, Maya sat on the kitchen floor. The overhead light was off. The stove light cast a yellow stripe across the linoleum. Bills were fanned out around her: electric, water, rent, the custody letter, a late notice from the pediatrician. She picked them up one by one, stacked them neatly, and put them back in the bread box. Then she sat there in the yellow light with her back against the cabinet and did nothing, because there was nothing left to do. 300 miles away, a man named Harrison Pennington picked up his phone. Harrison Pennington didn't panic easily. He had built a career on the opposite calm, under pressure, decisions made with data, emotions filed away until they could be useful. His fund managed $11 billion because the people who gave him their money trusted that he would never react. He would respond. But when his mother called him from the hospital that Thursday night, voice-thin, oxygen mask still on, telling him that she had almost died in a grocery store and that a young woman had saved her, Harrison felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt helpless, and that made him angry. Not at the store, not at the honey. Not at the fact that his 74-year-old mother was grocery shopping alone at a Value Mart when he could have had someone do it for her. He was angry at himself for not being there, for not knowing, for building a life so large and so optimized that his own mother could choke to death in a checkout aisle, and the first he'd hear of it would be a phone call after the fact. He flew to Richmond the next morning. Dorothy was sitting up in her hospital bed when he arrived, eating Jell-O with a plastic spoon. She looked smaller than he remembered. The hospital gown hung loose on her shoulders. The bruises on her ribs from the compressions were already turning yellow at the edges. An IV dripped quietly beside her. She smiled when she saw him, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She was still shaken. 74 years of living, and she had come that close to the end in aisle 9 of a grocery store. "I'm fine, Harrison. Stop looking at me like that." "Who was she?" he asked. "The woman who helped you." Dorothy shook her head. "I don't know her name. She was young. Black girl. She worked at the register, not even my register. She ran over. She was so scared, Harrison. Her hands were shaking. But she didn't stop." Dorothy paused. She looked at the window. "She held me afterward, on the floor. She held me until the ambulance came, and when they put me on the stretcher, she squeezed my hand." Dorothy's voice cracked. No one else moved. Not one person in that whole store. Just her. Harrison sat with his mother for an hour. He held her hand the way Maya had held it, not because she asked, but because he didn't know what else to do. When she fell asleep, he stepped into the hallway and called his assistant. "I need you to find someone. She's a cashier, or she was at the Value Mart on Midlothian Turnpike in Richmond. She was working Thursday evening. Register 4 or nearby. I need a name." His assistant called Value Mart's regional office. The request was simple: the name of the employee who performed the Heimlich maneuver on a customer on Thursday evening. The answer was not simple. "We're unable to disclose employee information due to company privacy policy." Harrison didn't push. He had learned long ago that pushing against a wall wastes energy. You go around. He had his team search social media for videos of the incident. It took less than an hour. The man who had turned back to his phone in aisle 9, the one who had started recording, had posted the video on Facebook that same night. 40-second clip, shaky footage, but clear enough. A woman in a blue polo on her knees, arms locked around an old woman's ribs. 3 compressions, a chunk of something flying out. Applause. The cashier crying, holding the old woman, not letting go. The video had 1,400 views, 32 comments. No one had tagged the cashier. Harrison's team ran the footage through a reverse image search, cross-referenced it with Value Mart's public employee records and local social media profiles. Within 2 hours, they had a name: Maya Lawrence, age 28, single mother, Richmond, Virginia, former employee. That word former made Harrison stop. He asked his assistant to pull her employment record. What came back was a single line in a corporate HR database. Maya Lawrence, terminated, reason misconduct. Harrison read it twice. He set the phone down on the table. He stood up, walked to the window of his hotel room, and looked out at a city where a woman had saved his mother's life and lost everything for it. His assistant, who had worked for him for 9 years, knew that silence. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't processing. It was the silence before Harrison Pennington decided to get involved. And when Harrison Pennington got involved, things moved. Harrison didn't call Value Mart's CEO right away. That would have been easy. That would have been loud. And loud is what people do when they want to feel powerful. Harrison wanted something else. He wanted the full picture because when he made the call, he wanted to make sure there was nowhere for anyone to hide. He hired a labor attorney in Richmond, a woman named Claire Ashford, who specialized in wrongful termination cases. He didn't tell her who he was at first. He told her the facts. A cashier saved a customer's life using the Heimlich maneuver. She was fired the same day for leaving her register. The employer coded her termination as misconduct. He wanted to know if that was legal, and he wanted to know what else there was. Claire took the case. Within 72 hours, she had pulled Greg Dawson's management record through a combination of public filings, former employee interviews, and a Freedom of Information request tied to a previous EEOC complaint that had been filed and quietly settled 2 years earlier. The pattern was clear, and it was ugly. In 6 years as store manager, Greg Dawson had terminated 14 employees. 9 of them were Black or Latino. Of those 9, 7 had been coded as misconduct, the same word, the same category, the same door slammed shut behind them. The other 5, all white, had been coded as voluntary resignation or position eliminated, softer language, cleaner exits. Doors left open. 2 of the 9 had filed complaints with Value Mart's corporate office. Both complaints were logged, acknowledged, and closed within 30 days. No investigation, no follow-up, no consequences. The system had worked exactly as it was designed, not to find the truth, but to file it. Claire also found 3 former employees willing to talk. One of them, a stock clerk named Andre Collins, who had worked at the Midlothian store for 2 years, told her that Greg once said in the break room with the door open that some people aren't built for management, while looking directly at the only 2 Black employees on shift. Nobody reported it. Andre said he didn't see the point. Report it to who? He asked. He's the one who signs off on the reports. Harrison read everything, every document, every interview transcript, every settlement agreement that Value Mart's legal team had buried in administrative filings. He sat in his hotel room with the folder open on the desk and the window dark and the city quiet below him. Then he picked up the phone and called the CEO of Henderson Retail Group, the parent company of Value Mart, a man named Philip Trent, 61, who had been in the role for 8 years and whose direct line Harrison happened to have because their children had attended the same prep school in Connecticut. The call lasted 4 minutes. Harrison didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't mention his fund, his net worth, or the 3 retail chains in Henderson's portfolio that his fund held significant positions in. He said one thing, and he said it slowly. The woman who saved my mother's life was fired for saving my mother's life. Her record says misconduct. I've seen the manager's history, Philip. I've seen the pattern, and I've seen how your company handled the complaints. I'd like to understand how that happened. And I'd like to understand what you're going to do about it. Philip Trent didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had changed. I'll have a team in Richmond by Monday. Harrison hung up. He looked at the folder on the desk. He closed it. Things were about to move. Harrison Pennington walked into the Value Mart on Midlothian Turnpike at 10:14 a.m. on a Monday morning. No entourage, no lawyers, no cameras, Just a man in a gray suit with no tie-top button, open a Patek Philippe on his left wrist that cost more than every car in the parking lot combined. He looked like a customer. That was the point. The store was quiet, mid-morning lull, a few retirees in the produce section, a woman with a stroller comparing cereal prices. The fluorescent lights buzzed the same way they always did. Register 4 was open. A new cashier was standing behind it, young blonde name tag still shiny. Harrison walked past her. He walked past the spot in aisle 9 where his mother had fallen. He could see it in his mind, the cracked eggs, the honey jar, rolling the small woman in a cream coat going down. He didn't stop. He walked straight to the customer service counter and asked to speak with the store manager. Greg Dawson came out of his office 30 seconds later, shirt tucked in for once, tie a little tighter than usual. He didn't know why. Something about the man at the counter made him straighten up without thinking. "How can I help you, sir?" Harrison looked at him, took his time. He studied Greg the way he studied balance sheets, not for what they showed, but for what they were hiding. "I'm looking for some information about an employee," Harrison said. "A cashier who worked here until recently. Register 4. She was let go about 5 weeks ago." Greg's posture shifted. Not much, just enough. His arms started to cross, then stopped halfway like he'd caught himself. "I'm not able to discuss personnel matters with customers. Company policy." "I understand," Harrison said. "I'll be more specific. Her name is Maya Lawrence. She was terminated for what was the word misconduct, after she performed the Heimlich maneuver on a 74-year-old woman who was choking to death in your store, in front of your customers, while you watched." The color left Greg's face in stages, first the cheeks, then the lips. His hand moved to the counter, not to lean on it, but to hold on to it. "Sir, I don't know who—" "My name is Harrison Pennington. The woman she saved is my mother." The store didn't change. The lights kept buzzing. The woman with the stroller was still comparing cereal prices. But something in the air around the customer service counter went very still, the kind of still that happens right before something breaks. Greg opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Pennington, the decision was made in accordance with company protocol. She left her register during peak hours. It's a clear violation of—" "You watched a woman die on your floor," Harrison said. His voice hadn't changed. Same volume, same tone. That was what made it terrifying. "You stood there with your arms crossed while my mother choked. The only person who moved was a 28-year-old cashier making $11 an hour. She saved my mother's life, and you fired her for it. Then you wrote misconduct in her file so she couldn't get hired anywhere else. Then you called her and threatened to sue her when she tried to report what you did." Greg's mouth was open, but nothing was coming out. His hand on the counter was trembling. "I know about Andre Collins," Harrison continued. "I know about the EEOC complaint that was settled in 2024. I know about the 14 terminations. I know about the 9 employees of color coded as misconduct and the 5 white employees coded as voluntary resignation. I know everything, Greg, and so does your CEO." The front door opened. 2 people walked in, a man in a navy suit and a woman carrying a leather portfolio. Harrison didn't turn around, but Greg saw them, and whatever was left of the color in his face disappeared. "That's Henderson's HR director and their outside counsel," Harrison said. "They're here for you, not for me." Greg looked at the 2 people walking toward him. He looked back at Harrison. He looked at the counter where his hand was still gripping the edge. "I was just doing my job," he said. His voice was small now, smaller than Maya's had been in his office 5 weeks ago. Harrison leaned forward, not aggressively, not theatrically, just enough. "No, she was doing hers." He stepped back. He nodded at the HR director. Then he walked out the same way he'd walked in through the automatic doors past the parking lot into a black car that pulled away without a sound. Behind him, the HR director asked Greg Dawson to step into his office. The same 10-by-10 room with the metal desk and the broken armrest and the poster that said, "Teamwork makes the dream work." The same room where he had fired Maya Lawrence. Greg sat down in his own chair for the last time. He was suspended immediately. The investigation took 11 days. When it was finished, Henderson Retail Group terminated Greg Dawson for gross misconduct and discriminatory practices. He was barred from holding a management position in any Henderson-affiliated store. Permanently. Maya Lawrence's employment record was corrected. The word misconduct was removed. In its place, terminated in error, reinstated in good standing. 7 letters taken off a file. 5 weeks of damage they couldn't undo. Harrison didn't send a car, he didn't send an assistant. He didn't invite Maya to his office or to a restaurant with cloth napkins and a wine list. He found the coffee shop closest to her apartment, a place called Beanie's on the corner of Hull Street, with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu, and he sat down at a table by the window and waited. Maya almost didn't come. Her mother had to convince her. "Just hear the man out," her mother said, holding Zoe on her hip. "What's the worst that happens? You drink free coffee." Maya walked in at 11:15 a.m. She was wearing the same blouse she'd worn to every job interview for the past 5 weeks, the one she'd bought for Zoe's preschool graduation. It was starting to pill at the elbows. She sat down across from a man she had never met, whose mother she had held on the floor of a grocery store while no one else moved. Harrison didn't start with the money. He didn't start with the investigation or Greg or the word misconduct that had been erased from her file. He started with his mother. "She talks about you," he said, "every time I call her. She calls you the girl who wouldn't let go. She wants me to tell you that she's eating solid food again, and that she switched from honey to jam." Maya laughed. It came out before she could stop it short, surprised a little wet at the edges. It was the first time she'd laughed in 5 weeks. Harrison told her what had happened. The investigation, Greg's termination, the pattern they'd uncovered, the record correction. He told her all of it calmly, the way he told her everything, like he was reading data, not delivering emotion. But his eyes were different. His eyes were his mother's eyes. Then he told her why he was really there. "My foundation runs a program with Virginia Commonwealth University. Full scholarships for non-traditional students, people who've been in the workforce, people with families, people who didn't get the chance the first time around." He paused. "I want to offer you a seat. Full tuition books, childcare stipend for Zoe, healthcare, 4 years, any program you want." Maya didn't say yes. She looked at the table. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had locked around Dorothy's ribs, that had folded the apron on the counter, that had gripped the steering wheel in the parking lot while she cried for 22 minutes. She looked at Harrison Pennington, who had flown to Richmond, hired a lawyer, called a CEO, walked into a grocery store, and dismantled the man who had tried to bury her, all because his mother told him about a girl at Register 4 who ran. "I don't want charity," she said. Harrison nodded. He'd expected that. "It's not charity, Maya. My mother is alive because of you. The fact that you lost everything for it isn't something I can fix with a check. But I can open a door that should have been open a long time ago. What you do with it is yours." Maya was quiet for a long time. The coffee shop hummed around them, the espresso machine, a couple arguing softly in the corner, a kid doing homework at the counter. Ordinary sounds, the kind that fill the space when something extraordinary is being decided. "Healthcare administration," she said finally. "I want to study healthcare administration." Harrison smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. 3 years later, Maya Lawrence graduated from VCU with a degree in healthcare administration, magna cum laude. Zoe, now 9, sat in the 3rd row between Maya's mother and a 77-year-old woman in a cream cashmere coat who clapped louder than anyone in the auditorium. Dorothy hadn't missed a single Sunday call in 3 years. Maya took a position at the Pennington Foundation as the director of a new community program, free first aid and CPR training for underserved neighborhoods across Virginia. She designed the curriculum herself. 8 hours on a Saturday, a rubber dummy on a folding table, a certificate at the end that participants could laminate and carry in their wallets. On the first day of the first class, Maya stood at the front of a community center in Church Hill, 12 folding chairs arranged in a half circle, a projector borrowed from the library, a box of latex gloves on the table. She looked at the faces in front of her: teachers, bus drivers, gas station clerks, home aides. In the front row sat a young black woman wearing a blue polo shirt with a grocery store logo on the chest. She had a name tag. She had tired eyes. She had a notebook open on her lap. Maya looked at her for a moment longer than the others. Then she began. My name is Maya Lawrence, and I'm going to teach you how to save someone's life. If this story hit you the way it hit me, drop a comment. Have you ever done the right thing and gotten punished for it? I want to hear your story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're not subscribed yet, you know what to do. We tell stories that matter here every single week.
A whole store full of people, and the only one who moved was a cashier making 11.60 an hour. Greg watched a woman choke on his floor and checked his watch. Then he found the only person who moved and branded her file with one word: misconduct. That word locked every door Maya tried to open. 9 applications, silence, a desk study, threat, an eviction notice, and here's what haunts me. It took a billionaire, lawyers, and corporate pressure just to erase 7 letters from a file. One manager almost destroyed her life, and the system didn't flinch. It worked exactly the way it was built, but Maya didn't wait to be saved. She fought it with a 3-hour email tapped on a dead phone, and 3 years later, he stood in a classroom teaching others how to do what she did in aisle 9. What does it say about a world where doing the right thing can cost you everything? And what does it say about us when we clap for someone's courage but never ask what happened to them after? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Share this with someone who needs it. And subscribe if you haven't. We tell stories like this every week because sometimes the bravest person in the room is the one nobody thought to protect.